So the next tense we're going to have a look at today is the imperfect tense, also known as l'imparfait. And this is another way of talking about events in the past, after we've already looked at the perfect tense, le passé composé. So, from talking about events in the past and what we've seen already, we should be aware that French is actually made pretty easy, because whereas in English there's so many different ways of talking about the past tense, for things talking about most things in the past, in French there really are only two that we need to be aware of. Of course, we've already talked about le passé composé, and today we're going to talk about l'imparfait. But it's an important thing, first of all, to understand what is the difference between these two. Now, the passé composé, the perfect tense, communicates the following sort of three sentences, and we're going to use the verb play as an example for this. I played, in the sense of a single completed action. I have played, the present perfect. And I did play. Now, the imperfect tense actually communicates three different things to that. I was playing, I used to play, and also in the same sense of used to, I played, but not anymore. Now that's one way of looking at it, just learning the different meanings of the imperfect and the perfect tenses. But there's also a grammatical background to this as well. For example, the perfect tense is used, as I said before, for a single completed action in the past, something that's happened once and is finished with. Imagine if you were telling a story, it's basically what's going on at the front of the stage. Now, the imperfect tense is the opposite of that. It's for continuous actions in the past, things that went on over a period of time or were repetitive in the past, or incomplete, things that possibly were happening in the past and were still going on. Perhaps that's in the case of also telling a story. If you think about the classic horror story that you might be reading, it was dark, somewhere a dog was barking. These are all imperfect sentences because they're sort of setting the scene. But then suddenly a man came on stage. Well, that's the foreground. It's the perfect tense, something that's happened once, because once he's on stage, he can't keep coming on and on and on and on. And the other way of using the imperfect tense is for describing the state of something. So, for example, the weather's a good one for this. It was raining. Well, that's the sense that it's raining over a long or a sustained period of time. But it's also good if you're describing what somebody looked like. He was tall. She was tired, those kinds of phrases. So you're giving the idea of describing the state or the appearance of something. For that, you'd also use the imperfect tense. Now, the important thing is learning how the imperfect tense is formed. And hopefully in this presentation, you're going to get quite a lot of practice at how this works. It is easy to form, but as always, you need to have a good knowledge of verbs and how you actually conjugate them. That means put them in the right form. And if you don't learn all the parts of the verb, then you're never going to become absolutely competent in understanding completely how to do the imperfect tense. To form it, you need to follow three simple steps. Now, I think a lot of people get scared by the imperfect tense because the step 2 is quite a tricky one. But again, practice always makes perfect. In the first instance, you need to look up the infinitive form of the verb. Now, for those people who can't remember phrases like infinitive, this basically is the form that you find in the dictionary. It's the to play, to go, to do. You then, crucially, need to find the nous, the we form of the verb. And we're going to look at some examples of that in this presentation. And finally, you have to add an imperfect ending. And again, that just needs to be learnt once. And once you've got it in your head, you shouldn't really forget it. And in contrast to a lot of tenses in French, this time, there really is genuinely only one exception to the rule. But as always, it's a pretty regularly used verb. So, let's look at some infinitives. This shouldn't be too difficult for you, and hopefully you've already got in mind what some of these might be. We've got a couple of ER verbs here, to play, jouer, and danser. We've also got a couple of IR verbs, finir and choisir. A couple of RE verbs, vendre and attendre. And here's three nasty little irregular verbs that, again, as always, you just need to be aware of. Avoir, faire, and être. Now that literally would be step 1. If you looked up these verbs in the dictionary, these are the answers that you'd find. Although remember, you're always going to find verbs next to the word verb or next to the letters VI or VT in a dictionary. And typically you're always looking for a word ending ER, IR, or RE. That'll stop you making the mistake of finding a noun rather than a verb. But this is the tricky bit. How do you find the new form of verbs? Well, for ER verbs, you take off the ER and you add ONS. Nous jouons, nous dansons. For IR verbs, you take off the IR and you add ISS, ONS. Nous finissons, nous choisissons. RE verbs are much more like ER ones. You take off the RE and you add ONS. Nous vendons, nous attendons. But as always with irregular verbs, you just need to learn the endings as they stand. We have, nous avons, we do, nous faisons, we are, nous sommes. And looking at that list, you may already be guessing which is the exception to the rule. Now step 3 is adding the correct ending. And as I said before, once you've learnt these endings, it's pretty straightforward. You take off the ONS. So here's the example we had first. We had nous jouons. So let's take off the ONS from the ending. That's going to leave us with nous jouons, from which we're also going to take away the nous. And now we've got what we call a stem. And a stem is what you place your ending on. In this case, the stem is jou, J-O-U. So let's put that next to all the parts of the verb. Here we go. Now imagine we've got an ONS from the new form like we did in the step before. We're going to take the ONS away, and then we're going to go and add the endings that go with the different people who complete the verb. So if you are I played, I used to play, I was playing, you take your ONS away and you replace it with AIS. With the tu form, take away the ONS, and just as with the je form, AIS. With the il, elle, on form, take away the ONS, and this time add an AIT on the end. Il jouait, elle jouait, on jouait. With the new form, one for the scientists here, ion goes on the end of it. For vous, ier, and for the il and elle form, it's exactly the same for both of them. It's A-I-E-N-T. But whenever you see an ENT on the end of a verb, normally you'd remember you don't pronounce the ENT. So that will be pronounced il jouait, elle jouait. So in actual fact, if you look down this whole verb, the je, tu, il, elle, on, il with an S on the end, elle with an S on the end, are all pronounced exactly the same way. The only two that sound any different are nous and vous. So now, let's look at some of these in practice and talk our way through it. Je parlais. Now, parler is a regular ER verb. We're going to find the new form of the verb, so we take off the ER and add an ONS, parlant. We then take away the ONS, and we put the ending which goes with je. So, je with parler becomes je parlais. Now, what you might like to do is have a go at some of these yourself. So, I'm now going to give you a bit of time to go and think about what the answers might be. I suggest by doing this, you need to pause the recording so that you can try and work them out, and then slowly but surely the answers will come up in their place. Have a go at that now. Now, you may be looking at these and thinking, hang on a minute, this is a little bit trickier than I thought it was. Well, just be aware that you always have to find the new form of the present tense. And for a lot of these verbs, like partir, for example, it isn't partissant, it's partant. So you take off the ONS and add an AIT. If you look at boire, and often you can look in verb tables, things like this to help you out here, it's nous buvons. So take off the ONS, add the ending, buvez. And with verbs that end with have a G involved in, like manger or ranger, you have to keep the E there, because if you don't, it actually causes difficulties with pronunciation. It would be manger, and in actual fact it should be manger. Now, for all of these answers though, don't forget, they all effectively mean the following things. Was and used to. I was speaking, I used to speak, for example. Now, I did talk before about one major exception to this rule. You'll notice that one new form, as we said before, didn't end with the ONS, and that was the nous sommes. So for this, you just simply need to learn a different stem. You don't have to worry about how it's formed, just know that it exists. And it's E accent T. So if we look at it in its entirety, j'étais, tu étais, Il, elle, on était, nous étions, vous étiez, il ou elle était. So there you go. It's the same endings, it's just the stem that's different. Of course, this translates as was or were, and that's often how it's used, so it's describing a state in the past. So let's have some more practice just to go and finish this off. Again, I'm going to go and put the questions on the screen for you, and I'll give you time to go and work out your answers. But remember, when you do these, follow the questions below. Did you find the correct nu form? So was it an irregular verb? Did you replace the nu with the correct subject? I, you, he, she, we, you, or they? And did you replace the ONS with the correct endings that we've seen before? AIS, AIS, AIT, IONS, IEZ, AIENT. Have a go at these. Again, I'll put the answers up slowly for you to give you time to pause the recording and then go back and check if your answer was correct. Did you notice in that last example how you had the example of a state, she was young, and then you had another imperfect alongside it? And if you're looking to go and write some fairly impressive French, it's very good how you can link these sentences together. Certainly if you're looking for an A or an A star at GCSE, you are going to need to put in some imperfect tenses, because it really does show a good in-depth understanding of the French language.